have an outstanding panel discussion for the next 45 minutes or so, anchored by Madan Padaki, co-founder of Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, GAME. And joining us on the panel, we have Avinash Pol from Paani Foundation, Sandeep Varaganti from Prione, Anish Kumar from Transform India Foundation, and Ashish Jina from Jumbo Tail. So to begin with, maybe we can do a quick introduction of each of you, maybe just 2 or 3 sentences, what you're doing, and then Madan Padaki will take over with some discussion on enabling market potential.
I'm Dr. Avinash Pol from Satara. I'm working with the Paani Foundation from last 4 years. I'm a chief advisor of Paani Foundation. And Paani Foundation is founded by Amir Khan and Kiran Rao. And basically, we are working, giving the trainings to the people how to do the water conservation works in different parts of Maharashtra. From last 4 years, we are working and we are connected with more than 6,000 villages.
Sandeep Varaganti. I've been with Prione for the last 5 years. Prione is a joint venture between Catamaran Ventures and Amazon. Catamaran Ventures is Mr. Narayan Murthy from Infosys. It's his private investment vehicle. So Prione was specifically established to help small and medium businesses, micro businesses as well across the country to get enabled online and succeed. And happy to be a part of this panel. I think we've been in the middle and we've got some data and insights from the ground of what the SMBs, MSMEs are facing due to the impact of COVID, specifically the impact of lockdown. And look forward to sharing my thoughts and hearing from the others.
Thanks, Madan and Madan. And really looking forward to the conversation today. Transform Rural India Foundation was set up about 4 years back. The idea is to bring integrated change in villages with the idea of accelerating intergenerational mobility. And so we work on issues of health, nutrition, education, livelihoods, youth, enterprise skills, so everything together to transform opportunities in villages. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
My name is Ashish Jina. I'm one of the co-founders of Jumbo Tail. We're a B2B e-commerce food and grocery company. We run a marketplace that serves about 25,000 Kirana stores in southern India. We also help our Kirana partners actually convert their stores into modern convenience grocery stores.
My name is Madan Padaki. I'm the co-founder of Game. And, I think we're really privileged to have such a diverse set of experiences. Anish, who works with grassroots entrepreneurs across several states. Avinash, who's actually been working again with rural communities in a very deep way. Ashish on the whole food and grocery side, as well as Sandeep, who's really seen platforms evolve and scale. So I think this will be a fantastic conversation and look forward to it. Game really is all about energizing and galvanizing the ecosystem to support mass entrepreneurs to thrive. And specifically in cases like this, mass entrepreneurs to survive and then start thriving. And this series that we're doing with Your Story is all about how do you learn from each other? What are the new ideas? How do we create collaborative opportunities, and how do we all work together? And that's the whole objective here. The next 45 minutes will be a conversation flow. We have a few questions. Essentially, this segment that we're doing is all about, we know that there are dark clouds on the horizon, continuing to rain pound. The storm is yet to pass. But what happens after the storm ends? What are the silver linings? What fundamental ways will businesses change? What are the new opportunities that will emerge? And how do we start preparing for those opportunities right from now on? And what should we as an ecosystem do to help small businesses identify, work on these opportunities, and how do we enable them to grab these opportunities with both hands and start their climb back from the precipice that we've all fallen down, right? So that's the whole idea. What will be, so basically I have 3 questions and we'll go through that, but as I mentioned, it's a conversation. So please feel free to chip in, step in to kind of add to what others are saying. Can we start off with the first question saying, given all your perspectives, what are the fundamental ways you think micro businesses, small businesses, and what we call as mass entrepreneurs, how do you think the world is going to change in a post-COVID world? What will that world look like? So if you can start by sharing your perspectives for a few minutes, for 2-3 minutes each, then we can go around the Zoom table, so to speak, and get a conversation going. So can we start off with maybe we'll start off with Ashish.
There's a few things that we're seeing happening during this crisis and during the lockdown, right? There's a lot of business models that a lot of people sort of position this as traditional versus digital. I sort of look at it a little bit differently. I think there are some aspects of business that are becoming much more difficult and will likely remain compromised until such time there's a vaccine or a cure or both. Right. One is any business that requires a physical interaction as a necessity for sales. Will necessarily face some issues given social distancing being a norm. The second thing that we are seeing is this is a continuation of a steady sort of NBFC crisis in the country over the last 2.5 years. But we anticipate, and we're seeing this on the ground, that credit availability is becoming even more compromised. So businesses that rely on large amounts of credit and money moving very quickly through credit will struggle. And this is something that I think we're seeing on the ground already. We're a country of entrepreneurs, right? I mean, a huge amount of entrepreneurs, and I think none more so than the local Kirana store. And I'm obviously looking at it from our perspective and businesses that we understand well. The Kirana has actually come out of this crisis, or at least we are not out of the crisis, but at least the first few weeks of the crisis, the Kirana stood tall in the crisis, and I think that's a function of some characteristics that these businesses have, which is just the sheer local reach, the convenience, the grit and determination of the entrepreneur. And I think while the Kirana has always had in food and grocery 95+% share of market, they've probably had about 2% share of voice and share of media. I think that balance is getting corrected, and I think that there's a lot more people recognizing the relevance and true importance of the Kirana. I think it's a normalization than anything else. But I think that especially in large cities, a lot more people are actually realizing that people who maybe didn't really appreciate the value of the Kirana, that the value the Kirana brings to their life. I think there's a lot more realization. There's a lot more connection being built, especially in upper middle class households. And I think there's an opportunity to, and I think that will extend forward. I think those relationships that are being formed and catalyzed during COVID will continue to remain. I definitely see that, Kiranas will continue to thrive. I think there's some interesting opportunities in that. It's not all good in the traditional food and grocery supply chain if you actually look further back. I'm also a third generation apple farmer. So, I sort of between professional and personal interest transcend the entire food value chain. And I see that, further back, because of the challenges I mentioned on, credit, people moving around and having to take orders, traditional supply chains like, distribution and wholesale actually are suffering. So I think what's going to happen in my mind is some sort of a chimera or an amalgamation of both, traditional and modern is going to get sped up. And I think there's a lot of business opportunities in that front. What I mean by that is that, even the Kirana is likely going to look very differently in the next few years, right? The opportunities in home delivery. Already about 25-30% of all sales out of Kiranas actually are home delivery. I think that number will go up. Kiranas purchasing more and more through more resilient supply chains. The use of technology within the store. I think the rise of modern convenience grocery is going to definitely get catalyzed by some of the challenges that COVID presents. But I look at those as opportunities. And I think we'll see a mass transformation of Kiranas. I think that we'll see a lot more entrepreneurs who otherwise necessarily weren't coming in to this space coming in because it will require more professionalism. It will require, more technology savviness. And, some of the barriers that prevented people from, getting into entrepreneurship. I mean, starting your own small business, Kirana is a perfect example of that, right? I think some of the barriers that in the past prevented people from doing that. For example, lack of access to enough suppliers. This is a generational thing that a lot of people pass down. I think with the rise of businesses like ours and a lot of other businesses that are sort of further back in the supply chain, really helping people source more efficiently, will allow other entrepreneurs to start doing this. And then there's a lot of initiatives that we personally are taking also to modernize stores and really help them on their demand side. That is acquiring newer customers, selling on hyperlocal platforms, really changing the look and feel of the store, branding them, providing loyalty and payments. I think there's a lot of value that can be created in that space.
The emergence of local businesses and community engaged businesses, and the face of these businesses will change by using more tech, by re-energizing the supply chains, by having them modernized, right?
I think we've always been a very, very local business economy in general. But I think that in the minds of people who shape opinion and in the minds of people who actually control the purse strings of this country, I think there's a newfound realization over the last few weeks. And I think that's going to be a good shift.
Sure. That's an interesting perspective.
Definitely, the pre-COVID world and the post-COVID world is definitely a different one. In the rural areas, definitely there is a very good opportunities of the villagers to form a good bond between each others. Because there is a problem with education, then the problem with sanitation. There is a lot of problem in rural areas. So migration is more in the cities areas. Migrated people goes in Mumbai, Pune, and most of the metropolitan cities for the survival. But because of the COVID, they came back. And they now realize the value of our own village. So I think it's a good opportunity for the villagers to form a good bond between each other, between these three, whatever the time we will get of the lockdown. The second opportunity, I feel there is a good opportunity for the farmers. So farmers are always struggling. There is so many problems. Sometimes the inadequate rain, kabhi barish zyada hoti hai. Sometimes rate get falls. The middleman, labor problem. So many things our farmers are always facing throughout the year. But I think the city people now realize the real value of our farmer in these days, because I get so many calls from the metro cities. Doctor, we want vegetables, we want fruits, we want groceries, but we have money, but we don't have all these things. So the value of the farmers definitely will be come to know the people. Then the farmer have a good opportunity to tag with city people to do the direct marketing. Likewise, in our city, in Satara, we started near about 120 vehicles in a different parts of our city. So there is a no किसी को भी बाहर सब्जी लेने के लिए बाहर जाना नहीं पड़ता. Everyone get the vegetables at the door. And I think this is the good opportunity for the farmers. Farmers get a direct marketing. They get a benefit. There is no middleman. Even the beneficiary, the citizens ones get a good quality and at a good rate of the vegetables. So I think it's a good opportunity for the farmers. Even in the meat business, have a good opportunity in futures. The online education have a good opportunities. Though I'm in the field of dentistry, I'm a basically dental surgeon. So the healthcare have a lot of opportunity in the futures, especially our Ayurveda and yoga. We can grab the opportunities in the world. The telemedicines, sanitizers, they also got a good opportunities. The financial planning people, those who are doing, they have a good days in futures. I think this is the different world we'll see after lockdown.
I loved your idea of connecting farmers directly to consumers. And really having them think like entrepreneurs. I think I read saying that a lot of farmers were saying, we thought our job is just to produce the and just give it to somebody. But now we are actually being able to think like entrepreneurs. So I think the insight that this will enable opportunities for more entrepreneurially minded, and there could be new emerging opportunities, not just in farmers, of course, where there's a huge area, what you're saying, online education, technology-based medicine, so on. We'll come back to, I would love to learn more, and maybe we'll come back to your experience of the Satara experiment that you did a little later. Before I get to Sandeep and talk about the broader platforms side of things, let me pull in Anish so that we can get another perspective of skills, livelihoods, and therefore opportunities that are emerging. And then we'll get to Sandeep to kind of figure out how do we apply platform thinking to this whole space that we're seeing emerging as well.
2-3 things I see. One is the distress in villages. But if you were to look at the returning migrants, what does the returning migrants tell? So on the ground, I see two strands. One is dreams, which they were, they looked at cities and opportunities outside the villages. That I see a shattering of that dream, and as they return in the traumatic manner that they're returning, so it has had an impact on them, and more as we see the transit camps getting open and the return, we'll see more of that. The other is the talent drain that had happened. So that's returning. So talent drain, both in terms of the better skill, the more entrepreneurial had gone out. So I see that coming back to village. So in terms of the rural economy, I see across. So farm we talked about. I see new energy skills. Coming enterprise. You spoke about risk taking and capital, but more importantly, it will demand very different, remuneration expectation would be very different now. And we'll have to look at high value agriculture, more market linked agriculture in a new way. Second is the entire edifice of the skilling ecosystem that we had built, the skilling ecosystem looking at individual ascension and looking at manufacturing and services, that has taken a massive hit. That anyways we were knowing that it was a challenge in after training them to get them into jobs outside was a challenge, but that I see the camera of jobs outside taking a hit. And as it takes a hit, the local placements, the local employment opportunities, and the demand on social security in these jobs would be very different as we see emerging. The third is the enterprises. Again, I see a lot of these youth that are coming back who had left farming. Some of them would go back to farming, but some of them would not be ready to go back to farming. They have more risk taking ability, they have more skills. Maybe many of them would be returning with some proficiency in some trade. In many places, we have randomly we find, in a deep inside a village in Mirzapur, I found a person with a stitching, is doing stitching of track pants, track suits. And he was earlier in Thane in a factory, and he had come back. So this was before COVID. I see many of such youths be returning with trade proficiency. And if there is some way of connecting them in some closed loop, hyper-local opportunities, if you are able to find out some local, we are able to find, enterprise connects. So that would be an opportunity to explore. All of this will depend on how do we now look at rebooting the rural economy. If we do the same and, give some more NREGS money, and it goes out in the same manner without asking at how the content of work needs to change, how the definition of labor needs to change. And that's one, a scheme where government has money, so it will start pumping in. We don't know what is the announcement at 8 p.m. When PM comes on Tuesday. But so we don't know how the government is planning to reboot, but there is an opportunity to look at rural economy afresh, look at rural economy in a more local manner, and in the more, as they keep saying, peri-urban, let's look at rural and peri-rural, and look at census towns to drive in various opportunities in the villages. That's how I see it emerging, Madan.
Sandeep, love to get you in and get your thoughts seeing from a larger platform perspective and Prione's experience as well.
I will try and not repeat what's already spoken of, so that we're trying to touch on newer insights. But luckily, I'm just coming out of a quick survey that we've done with a bunch of SMBs who collaborate on online marketplaces. And the insights are not too different from what's already been discussed. I think there's going to be a paradigm change in the way customers would like to access products. I think it's going to be a combination of physical and digital touch points. I think lesser of physical, but I think there will still be significant relevance of offline play. I think a couple of points that come to my mind that we should worry about or think about when we welcome the economy back on its feet is how do we fix the inventory or supply problem? I think that's the biggest reading that we've had. Like Ashish already pointed out, I think the Kiranas have started coming back on their feet. But while they've opened shop, I think they're still struggling with access to inventory. And it's a combination of what I've learned from the survey that we've done, as well as my own experience when I stepped out to get some groceries home. I think not everything's available that we generally have access to. So I think that's one of the biggest problems that we will need to think about. Um, Second, interestingly, I think one of our assumptions from the survey when we went in trying to do the survey was, hey, now that the lockdown is in place, now that demand for products, demand for essentials and non-essentials have dropped, will these SMBs have cash flow problems? Like there's no incoming cash flow, but they will still need to pay the rents out, pay electricity, take care of their manpower. And we went with a proposal saying that, hey, if you've got manpower that you'd like to offer for us so that you are staying light, so that we are able to provide them some meaningful employment. Interestingly, the insight that we gathered was that that wasn't a problem because there's no manpower available. So when the economy starts coming back, I think that one of the biggest problems that all SMBs, right, from manufacturing to retail, what they're going to face is lack of manpower. Like I think there's going to be a shift, and it's not just a shift within the industry. I think it's going to be a lot of shift between geographies also. For example, people have been displaced. Folks from the US stuck in India. Folks from India stuck in the US. Right? It's all over. My direct feedback is coming from these SMBs where they've said that we actually don't have manpower. And because they're not available, they're not physically present, we're not struggling with the problem of having to pay them because they're gone to their hometowns. So the second problem, apart from supply and inventory, will be how do we try and figure out the manpower. Next come the funding situation. Coming out of a couple of weeks of lockdown, I think it'll be very, very important to see how the different NBFCs, all and the lending platforms, right? I think there's a bunch of lending platforms that we from Prione have also been in touch with to offer loans to micro loans to SMBs, etc. So I think that will be an interesting aspect. That's the third piece. The fourth piece, and I will stop after this and keep the rest of what I've learned for the questions that you'll have later. The fourth, and I think one of the most important pieces that I've realized is we're going to have a crunch of raw material supply in the manufacturing industry. And why I say this is, apart from speaking to a lot of kiranas, we've been in touch with a lot of retailers and a lot of manufacturers who sell products beyond FMCG, beyond kirana sort of items, right? They sell online. We brought these folks from manufacturing clusters like Meerut, from Jaipur, from Surat, right? Ranging from apparel to furniture to sporting goods. I think one thing that they're going to struggle with is import of raw materials. I think shutdown has impacted that in a big way. So even if they are willing to open shop, if they are willing, even if they are willing to start manufacturing, I think the raw material is going to be a significant blocker. So I think these are the things which will start impacting the landscape. And I think the next couple of weeks are crucial to figure out how we are going to bring these aspects out. That's my reading so far. A couple of other data points that I'll keep for later.
Sure, thank you. I think the 4 points that you mentioned are very, very, very pertinent, and I think it kind of strings together several of the threads that other panelists have been talking about as well. Maybe I'll do one follow-up round of questions and go a little deeper into something that each of you have shared. And before I do that, is there any other points that you want to add, clarifications, or any questions that you have based on whatever has been discussed? Feel free to kind of shoot it right now.
I had a question. I think there's a lot of hope, or at least some potential of reinvigorating the rural economy being talked about. As a result of people moving back, as a result of these connections. I come from a very small village in Himachal Pradesh, right? And I think one of the challenges is not, life is not bad, but anybody with aspirations still wants to go to the city. And I think until such time that we solve for this gap of opportunity, I think it's not sufficient to say roti kapda makan is available. I think there are people with huge ambitions, and we have a very young population in this country. And they're not satisfied with just roti kapda makan, right? They want bangla gadi, they want other things, they want personal satisfaction, and I think as long as we don't solve for those, I mean, just people moving back to the rural economy is not going to, create those opportunities, and it has to be very proactively done. And I think there is an opportunity at this point where reverse migration has happened to a certain extent. But that alone, I don't think will actually guarantee that people continue to stay back. The lure of the cities is very, very powerful, and it's there because of the fact that that's where dreams are made, unfortunately, in the country today.
I completely with you, Ashish. And one of the things that we are trying to do at Game, and I think all of your inputs and stories will be very, very useful, is how do you build an alternative narrative? How can you say that, listen, there are positive stories, there are aspirational stories where aspirational needs are being met as well, right? And how can we then start, I'm sure amongst all the Kirana stores that you work with, or Sandeep, the thousands and hundreds and thousands of SMBs that you work with, there'll be some wonderful stories of entrepreneurs who braved odds, not just met their roti, kapda, makan needs, but have thrived in a situation like this. And similarly, Anish, Avinash, if we can start building those stories together and start saying that, listen, there are possibilities. It's just not that migrating to cities is the only possibility. If you can grasp these and be like this, then you can create many more opportunities. I think, as you said, probably now is the time to start shining the spotlight on these stories.
It's going to be critical in how platforms like ourselves, like a lot of online players and Game are going to come together and try and provide more opportunities for these people. I mean, just putting things into perspective, I think I'm talking about manufacturing, retailers, the entrepreneurs that are starting, right? I mean, these come together to make almost 80 million of these MSMEs across the country, and that contributes to almost 40% of the country's GDP. I mean, these MSMEs. So I think if you're able to create a platform and help these guys sustain the current impact, and provide opportunities for them to come back on feet, I think it's going to be game changing. I think all of us in this group have a critical role to play in that. I think look forward to what we can do.
To that point, and especially just taking the conversation ahead, you talked about raw materials being constrained, supply chains being broken, and therefore how do you get the supplies back on track? Do you see an opportunity for us to now leverage the SMBs to actually start looking at what we can do to increase exports, and also to look at import substitution itself? And can this be the trigger for us to start pushing for more exports for things that we've been importing needlessly? Can we start looking at alternative products and production here? What are you seeing on that is one question that I wanted to have you address.
I think it's a great opportunity, like you said. I think you already summarized it really well. I think it's a great opportunity for us to find substitutes for stuff that we've traditionally imported. While cost will continue playing an important role, I think the way the world economy is changing, the way the policy making is headed towards, right, the direction it's headed towards, I think there's going to be a significant change. And I think local manufacturing will be encouraged. While we heard the current administration speak about concepts like Make in India, we've not managed to milk 100% of that concept yet. I think this is going to be a significant opportunity. I think the way I look at it is, one will be manufacturing for local consumption, and the other will be manufacturing for exports. I think both are going to play a significant role. I'll give you a quick example. One of the programs that we've created at Prione, for example, is what we call as the private label program. What we've done here is we understood there is a. I'll give you an example just to put things into perspective. Imagine the home utility setup, right? I mean, imagine pressure cookers, imagine mixers, grinders, etc. I think brands which come to our mind when we think about these are brands like Prestige, Hawkins. These are brands that we've been looking at, right? Managed by really, really large manufacturers. But then we realized that in smaller pockets, I think we came across this brand called Fabiano from Rajasthan, from Jaipur. And then we thought that, hey, the quality is the same. They are maintaining the required standards, the ISI brand, and their ASP, the average selling price, is 50% of what a renowned brand like Prestige or Hawkins are doing. And these guys are small manufacturers. We created a program around it, and this coming to how we as a platform can help these folks, right? I mean, we created a platform, we created worked with a large online player to create the kind of marketing that's required for them to create a brand. And slowly we saw them taking market share of all the pressure cookers, for example, that were sold on Amazon or online, which is a good proxy. Amazon is a good proxy for online. From less than 5% when they started, this brand slowly captured 30% of market share online. So I think these are stories, these are manufacturers, and this is not an innovative product. Same high quality, but locally manufactured, locally encouraged. I think there's going to be more such examples. I think the next 6 to 18 months are going to be very, very crucial from a policy making standpoint, from an industry standpoint, from how the ecosystem comes together to support and encourage these brands, encourage these local manufacturers. It's going to be very, very important. And I wish that I continue to stay in the middle of enabling more such success stories.
Wonderful. I think that's a terrific story. And as you said, it's a very replicable story because you can think of hundreds of categories and thousands of players who can then compete and provide segmented niche value to various types of customers.
Right, exactly.
Right? And we keep seeing that. I also am a part of a rural enterprise called OneBridge, where we work with about 4,000-5,000 Kirana stores in rural. And every time we speak to them, they're saying, why are you pushing down products that we don't want? Give us something that is made for us, that meets our requirements.
Right.
Right. And therefore, I think that represents an opportunity for people to reimagine products and services for certain segments of people itself. And that could be a phenomenal, as you said, if you can take that in and push that policy through as well and enable it and the ecosystem. Ashish, you wanted to comment on that?
No, I think to both what the points that you both Sandeep and you made, right? One of the missing links in all of this has really been, I mean, there's a lot of potential in rural areas for value addition in food processing, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of talk that a lot of people keep talking about what to do. The missing link has always been market linkage, right? And also a certain amount of, I guess, entrepreneurial energy and obviously business acumen. So I think with some people moving back from cities, that could actually get plugged. But I think the market linkage element of it, which was seems to be the biggest missing portion. In the past, most market linkage efforts have really been supply side driven, right? It's like, I have supply, now let me go look for demand. I think one of the big offshoots of lockdown and COVID, etc., is now there's a lot of demand actually going out and looking for supply. And this is one of the big changes that we're seeing, right? Which is earlier, people, farmer cooperatives, FPOs were going out and saying, okay, hey, we have this amazing product, can you please help us sell this, right? And people like Sandeep probably were in a minority. We've been looking actively to work with at Jumbo Tail, looking to work with FPOs, etc. But I think that the number of people where now demands actually going back and saying, where can I get supply, where can I get things that people care about? There is an increasing, I think, significant deglobalization that will happen over the next few quarters at least. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity where new market linkages have been created. We have a platform much like the one that you're talking about, Sandeep, where we actually help small brands get access to 25,000 Kiranas in southern India, right? And we are seeing a lot of outreach from small brands, from people who have big aspirations but don't have the capabilities to actually take on the huge endeavors of distribution, etc. And given that traditional distribution has always been the biggest strength for a lot of brands. I mean, they've built a lot of huge brands have been built purely on distribution and not necessarily on differentiated product. Because of market linkage being created, right? I foresee that there's a huge opportunity to level the playing field because of that. And we at Jumbo Tail are working very, very aggressively to actually say, in much the same ways as you guys are doing, to say how can we take brands that have great potential, great product, differentiated offerings, and really level the playing field on distribution, level the playing field on go to market, and create new market success stories. And I think that's a huge potential going forward.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and I think. More than ever, you can feel the need to do that, right? And as one house comes crumbling down, what sort of house do we build is a conscious choice that we need to rebuild. Is a conscious choice we need to make. Let me get to Avinash, especially on the mindsets part. I think one of the things I read, when I was reading the case study on what you did in Satara, was that there was a lot of shock in farmers to say, how do we start thinking like entrepreneurs? Because one of the things that is required as we embark on this journey is that you need to seize the entrepreneurial energy. and or inject the entrepreneurial energy and make people believe that they can jump up to the next level when survival itself is in question. So, what have been your learnings? It's okay to showcase opportunities. How do you get them to go grab it? And what's the learning from there?
Basically, I am connecting with these rural people from last 25 years.
Hmm.
I got the platform of Paani Foundation, the work spreads some more.
Hmm.
And what happened from last 4 years, we are reaching near about 6,000 village for the water conservation works. And
Hmm.
many of the villages are solve their water problems. But then this COVID things has happened, and everybody is stuck up. But I convince the people this is a good opportunity for us as a farmer, कि यही एक मौका है कि जो आप अपना जो प्रोडक्ट है उसको अच्छी तरह से सेल कर सकते हो, अच्छी तरह से जोड़ सकते हो.
Hmm.
तो हमने काम चालू कर दिया कि किसके किसके पास क्या क्या है. एक स्टडी कर लिया कि गांव में किसके किसके पास क्या क्या है. सो देयर इज वन प्रॉब्लम कि लोगों के पास तो सब वेजिटेबल्स वगैरह ये तो सब थे ही, लेकिन शहर में लाना, उसको बेचना, उसकी परमिशंस, there is a in between the government, police, so many problems. So फिर मैंने पहले फार्मर्स को कन्विंस किया, then I convinced the police officer, the collector of Satara, then I convinced the municipal corporation, CO and additional CO. I convinced the corporators also कि this is the good opportunity for the farmers. अगर आप लोग इन फार्मर्स को लाइसेंस दे देंगे, परमिशंस देंगे, आरटीओ की परमिशंस देंगे, तो ये फार्मर्स डेफिनेटली अपना जो माल है शहर में बेच सकते हैं. और आपका जो प्रॉब्लम है कि एक जगह ही बहुत भीड़ होती है, पुलिस को भी प्रॉब्लम आता है, म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन को भी प्रॉब्लम आता है, सोशल डिस्टेंस मेंटेन नहीं होता, ये सब प्रॉब्लम्स चले जाएंगे. तो एवरीबॉडी गेट कन्विंस. क्या है, जोड़ने वाला कोई चाहिए. अपने देश में जुगाड़ वाला अच्छा आदमी चाहिए, और जुगाड़ वाले बहुत कम है. तो हम जैसे जो लोग हैं पढ़े लिखे ना, उन्होंने बाकी खेती नहीं करनी चाहिए, कुछ भी नहीं करना चाहिए, लेकिन जुगाड़ना चाहिए. जो अपने कॉन्टैक्ट्स है उसको जोड़ दो. तो वही काम मैं पिछले 20 साल से करते आ रहा हूँ. तो इसके कारण क्या हुआ कि हमने सिर्फ 4 गाड़ियों से ये शुरुआत की थी. अभी नियर अबाउट 120 vehicles are running in Satara. So yesterday farmers told me कि डॉक्टर साहब in one day we sold near about 20 ton of watermelon.
Wow.
So जो व्यापारी था वो 3 रुपए किलो से मांग रहा था. But the farmer sold at near about 10 to 11 rupees kg.
Wow.
So they get a triple times amount. So this experiment now we are spreading in different parts of Maharashtra also. In Solapur it is already started. Firstly I convinced superintendent of police. पहले आप एसपी को कन्विंस करो, क्योंकि परमिशन वहाँ ही है अंदर आने की. सो पहले हमने क्या किया कि एसपी के घर में सब्जी चालू हुई, उनके घर में अच्छा लगा. तो बाकी शहर में भी उन्होंने परमिशन दे दी. अभी सोलापुर, अकोला, बार्शी सब जगह ये मार्केटिंग अच्छी तरह से चल रहा है. अभी बिफोर आवर कन्वर्सेशंस आई गॉट द कॉल फ्रॉम सैनिक स्कूल. सैनिक स्कूल इज वन ऑफ द स्कूल इन महाराष्ट्र. वहाँ आज हमारी गाड़ी गई थी और वहाँ के लोगों ने बहुत खुशियां महसूस किया. आफ्टर कोविड ऑल्सो वी विल कंटिन्यू these things. So I think this is a good opportunity for the farmer to connect the people. और इसके लिए मुझे लगता है कि there should be some training is required for the farmers, how to do the grading, how to do the packing, labeling, because ये जमाना क्या है, मार्केटिंग का है. तो farmer doesn't know all these things. Then the maintain the relations with the peoples. These some sort of training I think will be required in the rural areas. Definitely it will flourish in the future days.
That's a terrific example. And as you were saying,
Yeah.
the moment people start seeing success, that 4 vehicles go to 120 vehicles because they're seeing, hey, kuch ho raha hai idhar. Like maybe.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense. What we hear from Avinash, what we hear from Ashish, Sandeep is all about various parts. How do you make it get real on the ground? And what are the challenges? What do we need to be doing as an ecosystem to make it happen on the ground?
Well, some of the things Madan and Sandeep and Ashish were saying and what Avinash said, if you just put this together, in some ways you look at, there was this whole farm sector crisis. This is about 7 years back when the erstwhile Planning Commission was there. They had put in a working group chaired by Professor Bauma on secondary agriculture. And it had flagged various processing which modern industry doesn't have much advantage. For example, I was talking to someone in General Mills. He says the flour mill remains same, just that instead of 2 stones there are hundreds together, and actually there is no advantage. And he was saying with Pillsbury they don't make any money on atta, they make money elsewhere. Similar stories with dal. Look at 600 or 1000 villages. We had a oil presser, we had a atta chakki, we had a dal mill. Everything has vanished without any, in terms of labor productivity advantage. There is not any productivity advantage. Just so why couldn't this be done? So one of the work, and Madan, we did with our food, and we put up these small dal and rice mills. About 10 of them we had put in MP. And just recently, and in some ways, it is with the new set of people coming back to villages who look at such processing opportunities. And in labor intensive in agro processing industry, I see a lot of decentralized outsourcing happening. And if on the other end, Sandeep, Ashish, and on this end, with the farmers, if we were to start working together and create such processing hubs, again, look at advantage. For example, if just the pulse is one example. If you just look at where it is produced, where it goes, travels, and where it comes for processing, and then where it gets distributed. MP, everything comes to MP for processing all over, and then it again gets distributed all over. It just doesn't make sense. And in this kind of COVID situation has told us what inefficiencies we had in the supply chain. And I guess with technology at one end and this set of people at the other end, if there was one bridge to create, there would be a lot of opportunities that can be created. And at our end, we have been looking at with game, that is one, if you start looking at, say, about 100 districts, rural districts we pick up, we identify such opportunities and we start connecting with Sandeep, Ashish at the other end, and many more. So, and if there is some way to create a marketplace for such an opportunity, I see some good can come out of this crisis.
Yeah, completely with you. And I think before I go to Ashish, the key that you're calling out is that the need for collaboration is much more than ever before right now. And if you can somehow align and connect all the dots in the right way, we can start making difference on the ground. So Ashish, will you come in? I also want you to address the question of saying, so what do you require? If game is, and game is not, in our minds, we are very clear that game is not an organization, it's all of us. If all of us have to come together as an ecosystem to make this happen, what would you expect the ecosystem to do? What do you expect all of us to be doing in a situation like this? And what is the war cry that you have in a situation for all of us?
I think just before I get to that, Madan, I think Anish made a point that deserves sort of double clicking. He was talking about the need for decentralization, and I think that's a very critical element of what's happening. I mean, a lot of times, people, we see, people starting to look at all the way from, CXOs at FMCG companies to even people in the policy space, ourselves as well, really looking at supply chains very differently, right? A lot of effort over the last few years has really gone about, efficiency in supply chain. But I think the part that a lot of people have missed, and, where people have gotten it right, or, half right, they have actually been able to continue to operate during COVID, right? When you look at supply chains, looking at it not only from the perspective of efficiency and cost, but also resilience, right? And that, I think that's a very critical element. And often when you centralize, especially in situations where you're creating these huge pieces of infrastructure, they get knocked out in one go. And I think decentralization, if it comes at without substantial additional cost or no additional cost, I think it's a huge opportunity, and to rethink the way that people even think about supply chains. I mean, the advent of GST was a good thing. I don't think we've seen the full benefit of GST, where GST pre-GST regimes actually caused huge co-location in certain places because of tax regimes. I think that advantage going away actually has forced people to think about it. COVID will actually push people further and further in that direction. Supply chain resilience is actually becoming, because we see crises every few years, right? I mean, demonetization was a huge problem. COVID is another one. there are frequent crises that are going to keep happening and impacting trade. The more decentralized and the more resilient, whether or not it's through decentralization, through building capabilities, right? I think often, especially in the e-commerce world, people keep saying, hey, outsource your supply chain, give it to a third party. We've at Jumbotail, we've had a very different view, and we manage and operate our entire supply chain, and that's one of the major reasons why we've been continue to operate, despite everything, all the problems on the ground. And I think we're seeing a newfound appreciation across the board, for resilience as a capability. And I think that is something that will drive decentralization. That is something that will actually, drive some of the measures that Anish is talking about. In terms of things that are required, and I'm going to focus on food and grocery because that's sort of my area. I think that we're seeing also right now is a very critical moment in time. Advocacy and policy plays a very important role in a lot of these things. Dr. Pol talked about how he has to talk to so many different people to get permissions and licenses and all of that. I think APMC acts around the country, and this is something that I would really push for. Because this is a state subject, there is a model APMC Act, but there are still many states where you still have to go to mandis, you still have to there's a fair amount of red tape associated with actually farmers selling product that is theirs. And especially now that there is more market linkage, I think there's a huge opportunity across the country to really, really revamp the APMC Acts to make them more farmer friendly, to make them more consumer friendly. I mean, I think, revamping the APMC Act to actually reduce the dependence on mandis and centralization into mandis, while the intent originally was to protect the farmer, what actually ends up happening on the ground is, neither the consumer nor the farmer is better off. And so I think now that there are more institutional mechanisms of market linkage and will continue to increase, I think huge push for advocacy and policy level around really help, revamping these acts is going to be critical. We have a huge opportunity right now because the public sentiment will support that.
Exactly.
I think in addition to that, a lot of people have talked about, there are some things required to make farmers or, people in villages who are trying to sell to, populations outside, much more ready to do that, right? So I think there's a lot of training around marketing, branding, standardization, etc. These are all, talked about by a lot of people, so I will not elaborate on that, but I think it's a very critical element. Just having product and there being demand is not often enough. And that's where I think, institutions like GAME, people on this call can really play a role in helping people figure out, how do you market? How do you tell the story? There are some incredible stories of, people doing innovative work. People in cities actually want to buy local. People want to support local entrepreneurs. How do you translate those stories in ways that are easy to communicate? And online platforms actually do make it easier to do that, right? And I think to communicate and spread that information. But it has to, go into packaging. It has to go into the messaging, and that's where I think opportunities present themselves for platforms such as GAME.
Makes a lot of sense, Ashish. Thanks for sharing that.
Madan, I think you asked for what should be the war cry for GAME for all of us together in this forum. I think the way I was trying to imagine, if I have to put it in short words, I think what we all need to come together and do is 3 C's. To collaborate, all of us together. Compassionate toward consumers, at the same time compassionate towards MSMEs. MSMEs include farmers, manufacturers, retailers, etc. So we have to collaborate to be compassionate to drive commerce. And when I say commerce, not e-commerce, because I think the game is changing. It needs to be a combination of e-commerce and commerce happening offline. So it has to be these 3 C's. And why I say these things is based on what we've understood so far. I think key things that we can help together is, for example, figure out dedicated events, right? You asked about what GAME can do. See if we can collaborate with large offline, online players to promote the health of small and medium businesses. For example, conduct events, offline events, online events. There are things like the Great Indian Sale happening on Amazon, a lot of events happening on Big Bazaar. Can we do something specific for SMEs? At the same time, can we do some support measures? Can we give up on margins, right? Is that something that we can do as an option? How do we solve for the supply problem? I think large companies, can they ensure dedicated supply? They already have solid distribution channels, and Ashish has already spoken about what he's doing from a farmer's perspective. Can we do something to bridge their supply problem? can we do something, give them tools, give them access to platforms that can improve their labor efficiency, right? There's a bunch of things which come to mind. I can keep on brainstorming. Maybe now is not the right time to brainstorm, but these are things which come to my mind. I think getting all of these together and offering it as a war cry message will be really helpful for this MSME community.
No, I really like the way you said the three C's, and I'm wondering whether this panel will mark the birth of a new type of commerce, not e-commerce but CC commerce, of a collaborative, compassionate commerce that can emerge itself. I love that thought. And as you said, there's so much to do, to be discussed, and this panel discussion is all about igniting those sparks of conversation. I'm sure this is the first of many that we will have. So thank you for that. Dr. Saab, last words from you on what should we be doing together?
I think the age of government, the people like Flipkart and other jumbo tails, and the people like us, they come together. If they come together, definitely the society will be get benefited. Farmers get benefited, and मुझे लगता है कि government को भी हमने अच्छी तरीके से देखना चाहिए, अच्छे चश्मे से भी देखना चाहिए.
Thank you. I think getting all the stakeholders together to work in synchronicity and work in a very synchronous fashion is the need of the hour. It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm just looked at the time and figured out that hey, 1 hour just flew by, and we could go on this conversation for several hours. And I think there's so much to be done. To take a couple of minutes, and I was just trying to sort my thoughts out on what are the key takeaways, what are the key summaries. I hear 4 or 5 things. One is that this is an opportunity to truly start looking at local as the center point, as the focal, than having outside-in model, right? So how do you sign this focus on local and make that local business be that point for the community to rally around? 2 is, how do you decentralize? How do you decentralize supply chains? How do you decentralize productions? How do we really use and build the new house based on decentralization or distributed models rather than centralized? 3rd, clearly, technology and platforms will play a massive role, more so in the future. And how do we prepare for that? 4th is that we need to spread positive narratives and use those narratives to build skills and use a pull-based model for skills rather than a push-based model, right? And how do you then showcase stories across? And the 5th point clearly is, how do you leverage and work with the government to increase ease of doing business, right? From a policy advocacy, how do you make commerce flow far more easily from a government standpoint? And lastly, as an ecosystem, if you can all embrace this CC commerce that we've just coined as a collaborative, compassionate commerce to emerge, so that not to usurp a byline, but sabka saath, sabka vikas, so to speak. Right? How do we get everybody to rise with together? I think is more the need of the hour. So thank you very much for each of you for sharing your thoughts. I'm sure there are lots of collaborative opportunities between just the 5 of us who've been on this panel, and I promise you that we will hound and take several of these forward. Maybe we'll come back in a month's time to report back how collaboration has happened amongst us itself to start with, and can we share some examples from there? So we at Game are happy to be of service to any of you and anybody listening in to figure out how to make this jugaad that, as Dr. Saab said, that how do you make the connections, how do you get things going happen. So thank you very much to each of you, and thank you to Madan and the team at Your Story for hosting us. Take care, have a great day, stay safe.